This is Delay of Game on 90.3 KRNU.
Live from Anderson Hall on the campus of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln.
Hi everyone, I'm Ryan Swanigan. Join me every Friday night from 7 to 10 p.m. for the final year of Jazzy Vibes. The 3-hour program will feature all sorts of great jazz, starting with 2 upbeat hours, followed by the calmer, more relaxing jazz to close out the night. So tune in Friday nights at 7 for Jazzy Vibes, only on 90.3 KRNU and krnu.unl.edu.
You're listening to Delay of Game on 90.3 KRNU and streaming on the web at krnu.unl.edu.
Welcome in to the Delay of Game podcast, actually. That's what we're calling it today, since there's no show. Give you a little podcast because, of course, it's Friday, and of course that means we cannot possibly leave out the weekend that is to come in college football. So therefore, it's time to get into our favorite part of Friday with Josh Peterson.
It's time now for the part of the show that should capture everyone's attention. Delay of Game and 90.3 KRNU bring you the most intelligent co-hosts in the state of Nebraska. Josh Peterson from Unsportsmanlike Conduct on 1620 The Zone in Omaha. What for, you ask? To give us his top 5 college football games that he's looking forward to this weekend. Do I have your attention now? If not, here is Josh Peterson's top 5 college football games to watch this weekend.
And joining us via the Delay of Game in Texas hotline, the one and the only Josh Peterson. Josh, okay, here's the thing. I am more than willing to let you make it 6 today instead of 5 because I feel that's how many great matchups are taking place this weekend. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely, I agree. There are 6 matchups between ranked teams, but I don't want to talk about those right now. I want to talk about, apparently, you're a jazz guy, too. You're doing millions of shows, you're millions of hours. I don't know how you do this, Ryan. You apparently have too much time and no time at all in college that you can have 100 shows each week.
I'm just kind of disappointed that you're just now learning about the fact that I have a jazz show.
Well, you never played me the promo for the jazz show like you did today.
Well, that means you're not listening to KRNU anymore then.
No, I'm not at 7 o'clock on a Friday night. I'm usually busy doing the Cox High School game of the week.
Well, yeah, I understand that, but, the promo doesn't play just at that time. It plays all over the place.
Well, I mean, in my defense, KRNU does not get to my car all the way here in Omaha. So
very good point.
I do have a little bit of defense there.
But you do have the TuneIn Radio app, which we are on.
I do. All right, let's just move on. Back to the college football game.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So as I said, if you want to make it 6 instead of 5, go right ahead because at least in my opinion, I feel there are 6 amazing games this weekend that are taking place. Do you agree?
Well, yeah, that's fine. Let's do that. Let's start with number 6, and that would be Oregon-Utah. So this game would have just missed my cut, of the top 5. It just misses it as I have it slotted at number 6. But it is a, it is a very intriguing matchup as far as what to expect. The Ducks right now are rolling. Of course, they have the huge performance against Stanford, who had had their number over the last couple of years, winning 45-16. Still worry a little bit about that defense. And kind of what to expect. Cal scored 41 on them a couple weeks ago, 20 points by Washington in mid-October. But I really like this Duck squad, Ryan. I really do. And, I kind of wasn't buying into Utah. And they showed me, a lot last week, only losing by 3 on the road at Arizona State to a much-improved Sun Devil squad. But I think that this is a game that the Ducks have an opportunity to run away with it and really cement themselves as that number 4 team right now. A lot of people are kind of wondering about their resume versus Alabama, who is sitting right behind them at number 5 in the college football playoff standing. So I think that this is a chance for them because their next 2 games aren't against ranked opponents. Colorado and Oregon State, 2 teams that are really struggling right now. So this is a game that before the Pac-12 championship, that first weekend in December, this is the final time that they will really be on our radar from an who are they facing perspective. If they get on our radar over the next few weeks, I think it's for bad reasons. So I like the Ducks to show up big in this game, to win going away, and to just kind of remind everybody, oh yeah, they are the Oregon Ducks, and they're ready to go, and then really kind of start preparing for that Pac-12 championship game on Friday the 5th against perhaps an Arizona State squad, perhaps UCLA. So we'll see what happens from there.
Oregon favored by 8 in this game, so essentially it looks like it essentially looks like Utah. Well, what happens if Utah wins this game? Let's go there.
Oh my gosh! Well, I still think Oregon wins the South or wins the North. But if Utah wins, it's intriguing to see, I guess, what would happen. In the Pac-12 South. I'm pulling up the standings right now, and so they sit at 4th behind Arizona State, who has the tiebreaker, USC, UCLA, and Arizona. So first of all, it knocks Oregon out of the playoff conversation, and then you got to hope for some craziness with Arizona State. They'd have to lose 2 out of their final 3 Pac-12 games, and I don't know, I'm not really finding them. Oregon State, Washington State, and Arizona. I could see 1 loss to Arizona, but not 2 on that schedule. So for all intents and purposes, good win for Arizona. Maybe, kind of puts them in that conversation for one of the other 4 New Year's, 6 bowl games. Not a playoff spot, but it certainly would knock Oregon out of the playoff conversation.
Yeah, right on. Let's move to number 5.
So this game, what we just did ends the night. Let's go to the beginning of the day, 11 o'clock, Baylor, Oklahoma on Fox Sports 1. This is a game that before the season I would have had on this day in the top 2 or 3 at worst, and certainly over a Big 12 game that we're going to get to in a few minutes. I can't believe that I'm going to Baylor, Oklahoma at number 5, but, these teams definitely have disappointed this year. Baylor's offense is not what it has been. I know that they're first overall in points scored in the country, but to me at least it does not feel like it. It feels like they are struggling, even when they put up, 61 in that comeback win over TCU. It felt like, that it just wasn't that old Baylor squad. They were getting beat by 21 before they came back and won that ball game, and that's one that TCU has to just continue to kick themselves over. But I do look forward to this game. Last year Baylor ran Oklahoma off the field, and they did it a lot with their defense. We've seen Oklahoma lose 2 close games. They lost by a combined 4 points this year at TCU in the game that put the Horned Frogs on the map, and then in mid-October against Kansas State at home, they lose by 1 point, 31-30. I keep going back and forth on this game, but I do think that the Sooners are going to be the team that pulls it out. I think that they get some revenge for last year, and I can't imagine a Bob Stoops team losing in Norman 2 times in the same season. So I like Oklahoma, but I think it's going to be a really good game to start off the day.
I want you to just guess what you think the line is for this game, unless you already know it.
No, I do not. I will say Oklahoma -6.
6.5.
6.5. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if they cover, but I like them straight up. I like Oklahoma straight up.
Interesting. All right. Number 4 now.
Number 4, a matchup out of conference this late in the season. Notre Dame at Arizona State. A really good 2:30 game on ABC in Tempe. This is a great matchup, and I look forward to seeing what happens with Notre Dame. They have the game against Navy last week. They win by 10, but playing Navy, it beats you up. It's a weird offense to prepare for, and I want to see how they move into their next week. Earlier this season, Ohio State played Navy, and the very next week they lost. They played Navy to open up the season. The next week they play Virginia Tech at home, and of course they lose by 14 points in a game that you want to talk about kicking yourselves. They are certainly kicking themselves for a loss to a team that is now 4-5. So, but I really like this matchup in Tempe. The crowds there are usually non-existent. They don't care very much. They will care on Saturday, even though it's going to be a 12:30 kickoff local time, so it'll be a really early afternoon. But I think that there are a lot of interesting parts here, and 2 teams that are suddenly on the national radar that we really didn't expect to be on the national radar at all this season, especially Arizona State. After that loss earlier in the year to UCLA at home, they just get run off. And, you and I have talked about Arizona State here and there throughout the season because they've been included in some of our games. And you know what I said. I haven't bought into them. I like Arizona State this weekend. I think that they're going to win, and I think that it goes back to Notre Dame playing Navy last week, and I 43 points against North Carolina, 31 against Florida State, 39 against Navy. That's the last 3 games that Notre Dame has played. So I don't know. I'm just not really buying into this Notre Dame squad right now. So I'm gonna go with Arizona State to get the victory and to really position themselves for a fantastic finish to the season. So they have Notre Dame, then they have Oregon State, Washington State, Arizona. They could very well be 11-1 going into that Pac-12 championship game. And if they continue to win and, the SEC West cannibalizes itself, TCU and Kansas State, one of those teams will lose this weekend, they could very well be the 5th or 6th ranked team in the country by the time the Pac-12 championship rolls around. And that would be huge for, obviously, them, but it'd be big for Oregon, too, facing a team of that caliber as far as cementing a spot in the playoff. It would cement either of their spots in the playoff. So if you're a Duck fan, root for Arizona State to win out. If you're an Arizona State fan, root for the Ducks to win out, and obviously root for your teams to win out because that would be big for each team's playoff chances.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The line for this one, believe it or not, is 2.5 in favor of Arizona State. You take out home field advantage, and the Fighting Irish are favored by only a half point, which is...
talking about home field, we've mentioned it here and there. It's so different in college football where it's not always, the 3 as it is in the NFL. I wouldn't be surprised if their home field advantage is only worth a point or 2, just because it's not really that good.
Mm-hmm.
It's hot there sometimes, obviously, but as far as crowd advantage, they don't have one. So I wonder... where this line would be on a neutral field. I could see it either, a push, even, straight up, or maybe Arizona by a half point.
Yeah. Very, very, very interesting matchup to watch again on 2:30 on ABC. All right, let's go now to number 3.
All right, you want to talk about games that usually are at the top when they play each other, and I have them at number 3, and that's Alabama at LSU. And especially Alabama-LSU games when they are in Death Valley, when they are at LSU, at Tiger Stadium.
In prime time.
At night, yeah. So, it has everything going for it, but I have just a little lower because I like 2 games just a tad more. This game is fascinating to me. We left LSU for dead a month ago when they got run off the field by Auburn, 41-7, that game at Auburn. They barely beat Florida the next week, 30-27. They run Kentucky off the field, 41-3, and then 2 weeks ago, of course, they're upset against Ole Miss, and now it's suddenly, wow, what do we have going here? Of course, the great defense from LSU, always existent, and I just think this team continues to learn how to win. They're 4th in the country right now in points allowed, and they just seem to be getting better week by week, and here comes Alabama, and this game, say what you will about it, but when they play at LSU, weird things happen, and LSU teams that are worse than the Tide usually play Alabama close, and I think that this one is no different. Talking about Alabama this year, I personally don't buy into they should be ranked 5th because of the eye test stuff. I think that they're okay. Maybe I'm being too hard because I don't really like Alabama, but I haven't been overly impressed by them this season. They beat Arkansas by 1 point on October 11th. Of course, they ran A&M off the field, but we've realized that A&M is hot garbage. They only beat Tennessee by 14 points. So I really don't know what we're getting with this Alabama team. And we had Dave Bartu on earlier this week on Unsportsmanlike Conduct. He joins us every Wednesday after 5 o'clock. And he had a great number that coming off a bye week at home, Les Miles, is something like 80% against the spread. He wins, he covers the spread in 80% of those games. Nick Saban, on the other hand, after a bye on the road, it's something like 40 or 30%. So both teams off high. It's at LSU. This certainly feels like a game. I know the line's right around 6.5, 7. This feels like a game that LSU covers. And honestly, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm picking LSU to win this game. I think that they get the upset. They almost did 2 years ago against a better Alabama team, and I thought at the time LSU was worse than they are right now. I know they had one fewer loss 2 years ago. But I like LSU a little more than that team. I like Alabama a little less. And so I'm going to go with the upset. I think the Tigers pull this off, and they really have a chance now to send this SEC West into mayhem. On Wednesday, earlier this week, we figured out the perfect chaos scenario, and that is where there are 5 two-loss teams, and LSU winning over Alabama would help us get to that area. And so I think that it happens, and I think, the craziness continues in the wild, wild SEC West.
This game is really confusing if you're looking at it and taking into account the home field advantage history for LSU, but yet you see the line of Alabama by 6.5.
Yeah, it's such a huge number.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I thought it was going to be closer to 3.5. It was like when LSU played Ole Miss a few weeks ago. I thought that line was perfect, and I didn't want to touch it. And now I'm like 6.5. I'm not a betting man, but that feels like easy money. Maybe a little too easy, but these teams always play close, and they always play close at Tiger Stadium especially. So yeah, that's a bit of a number for two teams that are so close so often.
Yeah, it's going to be one great game. You really, honestly, you would have to have 3 TVs to watch these top 3 games, because I think I don't know the order.
I do. I have 3 TVs, Ryan. I'm so excited.
Oh.
Everyone's going to be flipping their channels and going to sports bars, while I will be sitting on my comfortable couch with a bathroom 20 feet away with a cold beer in the fridge, and I won't have to worry at all.
Lucky you.
Yeah, well, about flipping. So let's get to number 2.
Yes.
And this is a game that before the season, if we were talking about this week, if it's not number 1, it's certainly number 2 right behind LSU, Alabama, and that is Ohio State, Michigan State. I just like another game just a tad more. But, of course, we've talked about this game a lot this week. We've talked to both a beat writer for Ohio State, a beat writer for Michigan State. This is the game of the season for the Big Ten Conference. It is so important for the national championship hosts, because essentially, if you are hoping for a Big Ten participant, whoever wins, you are rooting for them to win out. Unless you think that Nebraska can win out and upset one of these teams in the Big Ten championship game. But so you're looking at the schedules and you say, all right, Ohio State, they win. They have Minnesota, Indiana, Michigan. That certainly sets up for them to go 11-1. On the other side, Michigan State has Ohio State, Maryland, Rutgers, and Penn State, and that Penn State game is on the road. So maybe a little bit of a tougher road for them just because of that Penn State game being on the road. But for the most part, 2 schedules that look pretty even the rest of the way until that Big Ten championship game against either a Nebraska or a Wisconsin. And so there are so many variables. The performance last year and what we expected going into the Big Ten championship game, and then how Michigan State just flipped that on its head. They were up 17-0. They have a comeback in the fourth quarter. They're actually down going into the fourth quarter. They come back and win. Ohio State, earlier this year, losing to Virginia Tech. Michigan State losing to Oregon on the road. So, Michigan State's loss obviously much better. Ohio State's loss still baffling. I can't wait for this game, personally. I think it's going to be great. I think that the atmosphere is going to be good. The weather is setting up to be kind of like Nebraska, Michigan State in early October. Really crappy, about 40 degrees with some rain. So I'm interested to see how that affects the ball game. But you have 2 evenly matched teams, 2 teams that are so physical, but they're Michigan State is just so much better than they were 5 years ago. It's astounding to watch the growth of this program. And then on the other side, Ohio State, has had tons of success over the last 5 years. And then you see what happened last year and getting upset, and that, ruining their national championship hopes. It literally knocked them out of the national championship conversation. So I look forward to this game. I've been flip-flopping on it all week. I'm going to go with Michigan State to get the win at home. I just think that they are a little bit better, but I think it's going to be a really close game. I honestly do. I don't think that either team is going to run away with it, and I think Michigan State gets a close victory and then starts rooting for Nebraska really, really hard. Even though you don't really like seeing a team for the second time, you definitely want to see Nebraska, because right now sitting at 13, by the time that game rolls around, if Nebraska's won out, they'll be sitting, 6th, 7th, 8th, somewhere in that top 8, in my opinion. So the Spartans are going to be huge Husker fans over the next month if they're able to pull this off.
Yeah, we're definitely going to talk about this game a little bit more and its impact on Nebraska and the implications that surround everything in the Big Ten and the top tiers of the West and East later. The spread on this, 3.5 in favor of Michigan State. That seems just about right. So going to be a fun game to watch. Of course, number 1, Josh, the teams in purple.
I know, and how about this? You want to talk about games that I didn't think were going to be in the top 5 at all this year. This is certainly one of them. Kansas State
agreed.
At TCU. We were talking about, I mentioned Dave Bartu a few minutes ago. We were talking about this with him on Wednesday, and we were talking about this game and Kansas State and Bill Snyder. And You want to talk about a man with a tremendous legacy, one of the greatest coaches of all time. And first of all, what he did in his first stint with Kansas State is phenomenal. I mean, they were a game away from the national championship in 1998 before they lost in overtime to Texas A&M. Personally, that's the best Kansas State team he's ever had. In my opinion, at least, I think it's the best. And then he has the run 2 years ago where they go into Baylor on a Saturday night the week after Alabama had lost. Them and the Ducks and Notre Dame were all undefeated, and the Wildcats and the Ducks get upset, and that allows Alabama to get back in the conversation. And now here Kansas State is once again on the road at TCU. What's fascinating is moving forward, if you're a Big 12 guy and you're saying, I just want a Big 12 team in the playoff, you're easily rooting for TCU because here's the schedule for TCU, first of all. Kansas State at home, at Kansas, at Texas, Iowa State at home. Simple enough. Here is Kansas State's schedule.
Yes, this is fun.
At TCU, at West Virginia on a Thursday.
Yep.
Kansas at home, at Baylor. So 3 games to finish up the season against ranked teams, all of them on the road, all teams in the college football playoff top 25. I do, though, like Kansas State more in this matchup. I just like them a tiny bit more, even though TCU's resume is incredibly impressive. They have the home field advantage. And they have a really good coach. That's the thing. I'm giving the coaching edge to Kansas State, and that's not a knock at all on Gary Patterson. It's just that they have the wizard in Bill Snyder. I don't know if Kansas State's going to win out, but I'm honestly rooting for it. The Big 12 hate of them has gone away, and I just think it would be such a cool story to see them in the playoff. After everything that they've done, they've never been in a national championship game. Of course, they made some BCS games over the years, but this would be, the all-time season for Bill Snyder if he was able to navigate this with Auburn, with Oklahoma, with TCU, West Virginia, Baylor. I mean, it's a brutal schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Texas in there as well, who obviously has better athletes. So I like Kansas State a little bit more. I can't wait for this game though. This is it's an earlier game, so it's at 6:30, so it will actually end before Alabama and LSU, and then that Ohio State-Michigan State matchup. I can't wait for this game, though. I think it's going to be great, and I think Kansas State wins a close one.
TCU favored by 6 in this one on that spread.
Oh, my gosh, that number's too big.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of surprising, but I guess there must be something about home field advantage for TCU that we don't know about there. All right, thus concludes the top 25 for Josh. Let's get back into the Husker football situation. A bye week this week. You have so many great matchups this week. First of all, does the overall matchups that are going on between so many teams that are in front of Nebraska play in their favor as far as moving up the college football playoff rankings?
Oh, absolutely they do. So Nebraska's sitting at 13. No matter what happens, so if Michigan State were to lose, Ohio State would just take their spot. So they're at least gonna stay at 13 because of that matchup alone. Because it will just knock Ohio State further down the picture, or it will knock Michigan State out. In front of them, if Baylor were to lose, now Oklahoma's sitting at 15. But if Oklahoma wins, I could see Nebraska, jumping up a spot and Oklahoma being right behind them. Though Oklahoma's resume is pretty impressive, even with 2 losses. Ole Miss in front of them. I don't think anything would happen. Notre Dame, Arizona State, they're going to take one of those 2 teams' spots, and they'll probably take either Kansas State or TCU's. One of them will get knocked down as well. So Nebraska is looking at jumping, I think for sure 2 spots. I think at least to number 11 just by sitting there. Now, LSU winning over Bama would certainly put LSU above Nebraska. I'd be interested to see how far Bama would drop because they are at number 5. So that could hurt them because they could gain, they could just move LSU in front of them. But I think Nebraska's moving up 2 spots this weekend.
At minimum?
Home. And I really think that they could move up 3 and they could be a top 10 team going to Madison, Wisconsin next weekend.
Would you say moving up to 11 is at minimum?
Yes, I think 11 is for sure. I think Nebraska's moving up to 11. Like I said, I think Oklahoma could jump them with a win. I think LSU could jump them with a win. But you're also going to lose Notre Dame and you're going to lose Michigan State. So I guess I could see them pushing and just staying right at their spot. But I'm going to say they jump up to 11.
So TCU and Kansas State 6 and 7. Does Nebraska move in front of one of them, or are they still
Yeah.
behind both of those teams?
I think that the loser of that's behind Nebraska. The loser of Arizona State Notre Dame is also behind Nebraska.
Right on.
So
All
I
right.
think they move up to 11 by sitting at home, and that would, I mean, you want to talk about a great opportunity. We talked about this a couple weeks ago before the playoff was revealed and where Nebraska would be sitting if they were to win out before that game in Indianapolis. I maintain that they'll be somewhere at 6 through 8. And John and I debated this a lot on the show, and I think that I'm looking right. I think that I'm starting to look like I had the correct prediction because they're already at 13. I think they'll be at 11 after this weekend, and then you get a win over Wisconsin, and you're in the top 10. And so that's what they have to be. I maintain you just got to be in the conversation. Last year, Michigan State, in mid-October wasn't ranked. They were 10 by the time the Big Ten championship game rolled around. I think Nebraska's going to be higher than they were. Now they probably won't be facing a team like Ohio State last year that was ranked 2 or 3. I think Michigan State or Ohio State would probably be right around 5 or 6. But I think that they'd be in the conversation, and that's what you want at this time of the year. You want to be in the conversation.
So, getting back to Michigan State, Ohio State, the implications of this game. You think Michigan State wins. Is it good that Michigan State wins for Nebraska's sake? Or if Ohio State wins, what does that mean for Nebraska? Either way, the winner of this game, what does it mean for the Huskers?
So we've talked about this a lot, and we were trying to figure out what the best scenario is. We agreed that it would be a Michigan State victory. First of all, Michigan State's higher. They're ranked 8th. Ohio State's 14. Now, Ohio State wins their for all intents and purposes, they are taking Michigan State's spot. I don't know if they'd jump all the way to 8. I probably would say yes, they would, if not higher. Probably a little higher because the loser of Kansas State TCU will drop down. And then who knows, if LSU upsets Alabama, then they could be all the way suddenly up to 6. And I think the same could happen to Michigan State. I think the winner of this game is for sure at 7. And then, if Alabama gets upset, they're all the way up to 6. But I think you want Michigan State to win for a few reasons. First of all, I think having an opportunity to face the team that beats you, and then if you pull off the upset, it basically eliminates that loss, in a sense of, well, hey, they lost on the road, and now it's a neutral site, and we found out that Nebraska was truly the better team, or something like that. That's, if you're a Husker fan, that's what you're hoping for. And right now, I just think that beating Michigan State gets you a little bit more respect than beating Ohio State does, and I think that shows in the polls right now. I think that shows where Michigan State's ranked. So I think Michigan State continues to win. They will be in a higher position, maybe by a spot or 2, than if Ohio State were to continue to win, and that's just because of where Michigan State is now. But I think that and the loss factor that you have of already losing to them earlier this season, I think that those two things together, I think if you're a Nebraska fan, you're rooting for Michigan State this weekend on Saturday night in East Lansing.
So I asked you this question last week, and I'm probably going to ask you it again this next week for sure, but certainly today as well. Considering Nebraska's remaining 3 games, not including the Big Ten championship, the point is of them getting there, can Nebraska still win out at this point to get to the Big Ten tournament? Championship, excuse me.
Can they? Certainly. Will they? I'm a little, more weary than I was a week ago. The Purdue performance was interesting to say the least, and Wisconsin's a better team now. And so here's the thing: if you're a Nebraska fan and you're looking at Wisconsin and you want to knock them down and say, no, I'm not buying them yet. I can certainly understand that. They lost Northwestern. They beat Illinois by 10. And who have they beat the last couple of weeks? They boat raced Maryland and Rutgers. Whoopee. I mean, that's what you're saying. Though on the other side, I'd say, yeah, but they are the hotter team right now. They're playing better. Whereas for Nebraska, they've played some lesser teams. They played Rutgers and didn't look that dominating. They played Purdue last week, who, by the way, Wisconsin plays on Saturday, and that's a very intriguing matchup to see, what happens there and what it means, for Nebraska and how they played last week. So I get not buying into Wisconsin. Personally, I am a little bit, just because I think that their offense is clicking. Now, I still don't trust either of the quarterbacks, Joel Stave or Tanner McAvoy. I really don't know what we're going to get with either of those two guys. But, I mean, Melvin Gordon's averaging 7.5 yards per carry. Corey Clement's averaging 6.5 yards per carry. He'll probably be over 1,000 yards. Melvin Gordon will probably approach 1,800 on the year. So can Nebraska win out? Definitely. I want to see what happens in that Wisconsin game. Right now, if you were to ask me who's going to win that game, I would pick Wisconsin, and that changed because before the year I said Nebraska. A couple weeks ago I said Nebraska, and I'm just not buying this team. No, wouldn't the most Bo Pelini/Nebraska thing ever be to beat Wisconsin and then somehow lose at home to Minnesota and just really take the air out of the balloon? So right now I'm buying Wisconsin a little bit more. I don't like Nebraska right now. I don't know. Let's see what happens with Amir Abdullah's injury, and I don't trust Tommy Armstrong. As simple as that. I know we talked about it. I was on your show the Monday after the Michigan State game.
Mm-hmm.
We talked a lot about that quarterback situation, and I certainly still would rather, if you're giving me the option, I'd rather have Armstrong than Fife. But the worries I had about Armstrong that day, they still remain. And until he proves that he can be a 60% passer consistently, I think that you're going to have an issue, and I think it's going to hurt if Amir Abdullah is not himself, and that's what I want to see. I want to see if Amir Abdullah can be Amir Abdullah, because if he's not, this Nebraska offense might as well be the 2009 Nebraska offense, which, as most of us remember, was terrible. So we'll see what happens, but Armstrong has a lot to prove to me, as does Tim Beck.
Yeah, very, very fair. Also, quick mention, Iowa, Minnesota play each other this week.
Exactly, yeah.
That's going to be one of the more important matchups to watch as far as the Big Ten West Division goes, because immediately now you have one of those teams with one loss and the other team has two, ideally, as far as the standings go, giving the edge to Nebraska, and it's one lesser team that they have to worry about towards the tops, even though they still have to play all three of them, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. So quick prediction on who wins that one, Josh?
I'll go with Iowa. I think they're the better football team right now. I've been disappointed in Minnesota over the last few weeks, so I will go with Iowa to get the victory.
Awesome. Josh Peterson from Unsportsmanlike Conduct on 1620 The Zone in Omaha joining us. As he usually does on this Friday, that's going to do it for the Delay of Game podcast. Josh, enjoy this awesome weekend. Enjoy your 3 TVs that you can also watch, too.
It will be glorious, Ryan.
I bet it will.
Very much.
We will, well, actually, we won't take a break. That's going to conclude the podcast. So we will hope that you all enjoy your weekend, and we will see you on Monday at 4 right here on 90.3 KRNU. For now, Ryan Swanigan with you. This has been the Delay of Game podcast with guest Josh Peterson.